Merry jingly, everyone! It is the final log of Vlogmas. I hope you've enjoyed this December's festivities. We're never doing it again. Until maybe next year. But, it's been fairly hard work on me and Dan, this, because we're lazy. Well, I am. Dan has a lot going on. Hasn't been feeling that well. So, if you see Dan on the street, because I'm pretty sure it's just Murray who watches these. Hello, Murray. How you doing? Give him a hug. Especially if you don't know him. That'll send him running screaming. And I always like seeing that. Record it and post it to YouTube. For all that fun. So, like Daniel, I'm discussing my politics today because, well, it seems the thing to do. It seems we're lifting the caveat, memorandum, all those words of self-censorship and self-censure for the channel, and basically allowing us to talk about everything, really. I mean, we did think for a minute that we would maybe produce just a lot more political content, but it seems to have badly affected Daniel. I don't know how he would feel about doing political stuff more often, because, well, you saw how he was in the last vlog. He's not been a happy bunny. But I like talking about politics. Politics, religion, and philosophy. 3 things that shouldn't be discussed at the dinner table, but should be discussed everywhere else, I guess. So, maybe as you're walking to the dinner table, you just abruptly halt your deep and complex thoughts on religion. It's like, no, now we must talk superficial things. How are your godfish? We were just discussing the relative merits of Kant's theory of God. No. We only talk about the godfish here. I haven't used that voice in a while. So, what are my politics? Well, they're fairly easy to sum up in mindless catchphrases, as most politics are these days. It basically comes down to don't be a dick. Be excellent to everyone. Or, if you want to be slightly more cogent and better, quote, the greatest good for the greatest number. This is a quote, I believe, from an unpublished work by James Mill, the father of John Stuart Mill, both very famous utilitarians. So, I basically believe that the function of society, specifically government, is to allow individuals to achieve the most. Now, what this entails is supporting people through basic infrastructure by fostering an environment where learning, development, and culture can accrue, if you will. What it doesn't entail is blowing people up. I don't see military needs as a part of a government's function. I'm actually quite radical in this. I think it would be a good thing if the major nations of the earth agreed to a similar thing that Japan had foisted on it, where we can only mobilize a force for defense. I think that would be the best way. And have an international body that's far closer to a police-keeping agency to deal with international problems and actually give that international body some teeth. But we'll never see that happening. Not with this current political system. By this, I naturally agree with things like free education to all, free healthcare, free fire and police services. I also think utilities should be government-owned, or at least the infrastructure should be government-owned. Then other companies rent from the government to allow for a varied market there. This way there can be social pleasure to improve the utilities, which we don't have at the moment. Because I was actually thinking about this the other day. We all use the internet. In my country, especially the area I live in, because I live in a fairly rural part of the world, the copper here that I get my internets on is probably from around the time of the Second World War. Think about that for a minute. Antique copper. It's now providing a service it was never expected to provide, but somehow the companies can charge more and more each year to improve, a server when the basic infrastructure has not been improved in decades. Now, you may ask, why do I think this? Because I believe that the basic function of government, the reason we come together to form a government, is to support each other. It is to create a support system greater than the family unit. I think that's sort of missing from a lot of discourse in politics these days. What is the basic reason we have a government? If we go the ultra-libertarian route that a lot of people propose, that we should be entirely self-sufficient, blah blah blah, why do I count myself a part of this nation then? There's no point in me being in the nation existing other than perhaps a mutual defence pact, but I think that's going backwards in terms of the development of civilization. Now, civilization is not a one-way street. That's a very old anthropological idea, but I think that's an antiquated and an untenable position to be in. I think that there are so many people now, and society is too complex for a purely relation-based support system to exist. It's very difficult to sort of think about how we can build that. So, onto sort of more buzzword-worthy things. I am very much a feminist. I believe in equality of the sexes, and not just of the sexes, but of everyone. I think fundamentally humans are identical. We're all made of the same stuff, star matter, and whether there's only minor differences of culture. I even believe that gender roles are really a cultural thing. Now, people may take issue with this, with something I'll bring up later, but that's a discussion I'm willing to have with people if you want to have it. So yeah, I think humans are fundamentally all the same. Now, everyone is an individual and all that, but at our basic level we are all the same, and we all want the same basic things. We want to do well, we want our families to do well. We don't want pain, and we want ease. That's essentially it. And I think if you can provide that for people, or at least allow or create an environment where that can be provide for themselves, I think that's a good society. Quality. Now, when I say I'm a feminist, basically I don't mean the type of feminist Dan means. What Dan thinks of a feminist is the screeching Tumblrite feminist, who, drinking men's tears, yes all men, that kind of reactionary feminist. I'm not, of all things, I'm not particularly radical in my feminism. I think men and women are fundamentally the same. I think we need to be treated the same. In fact, I think the best course, in a legal sense, is to remove gender from all law. Just have no division in law of gender. I think that would do a lot of good. I also think that people should have the right to control over their bodies. Now, I also believe in transhumanism, so I think we have the right to improve our bodies as well, but we can't really do that yet. Like rights of abortion, I think that's something that should be innate to every person, man or woman, because I'm of that lefty persuasion that believes you don't have to have a penis to be a man. It's basically that people are equal, and we need to recognise that under law and in society. We need to stop things like disparity of pay, like underrepresentation, though not tokenism, that is a different thing, and also encourage both men and women to equally engage with all aspects of society. So we need to encourage women into STEM. We also need to encourage men into especially the earlier teaching professions and sort of nursing and that kind of thing. There is a stigma against men in those positions, just as there's a stigma of women in STEM. And I think we need to address that balance, because frankly it's absurd that a single chromosome can determine how society treats you. I think that's absurd. And coming on to that, I'm also very pro LGBT rights, particularly the T, because I'm biased. I'm trans. You heard it here first, folks. I'm male to female transgender. I haven't transitioned yet due to problems with family and health and such, but it's a big part of who I am. And I think that LGBT rights are the next step in sort of in the civil rights procession. It's the next step forward, that we recognise that the cis-heteronormative norm is not that there is a multiplicity of genders and sexualities, that life isn't vanilla, that there are so many interesting and wonderful variations of people, and that we should, as a society and as a species, embrace that diversity and that strangeness, and that we shouldn't marginalise anyone for that unless it is harmful to someone. That is the only time I think that you can really go, you are wrong in choosing to do something, is if it harms another person. I even think you should have the right to harm yourself. This actually goes back to an old discussion I had with my mother about John Stuart Mill. Essentially, the Miltonian argument on suicide is to commit suicide causes greater harm to those around you than any relief you can feel. I fundamentally disagree with that. I think that's just a stigmatisation of mental health issues, that it is somehow not real pain. And I think if you talk to anyone, and increasingly more and more people suffer from mental health problems, myself included, they'll tell you that the pain is more than real. Myself, I suffer from a wonderful psychosomatic disorder, where whenever I feel intense emotion, it feels as if my nerves are aflame in the entire left side of my body. You know, no physical cause for that other than a hormonal imbalance up here, but it feels like this side of my body is charring. Tell me that's not real. Next to sexuality, I think freedom of religion is also very important to everyone. Though I do wonder where the line is drawn there. I find religion a very difficult thing. Religion is something I fundamentally don't understand. In the experience of religion, it's one of those things. You know, I'm an atheist in the same way one is asexual. I have never experienced faith in the higher being. I have faith in humanity, but that's not really a higher being. That is simply a recognition that my capabilities are the same as the capabilities of those around me, at the very least. But I find religion very fascinating, and I think you should have every possible right to pursue it. Once again, until that hard limit of the moment it hurts someone else. Though there's also sort of matters of law. Should religious law supersede secular law? Now, this isn't just about Sharia law. There's Talmudic, rabbinic law in Judaism, or even, you know, law of the church in Christianity, and I think the Jains have a very complex religious code. At what point does collectives' religious beliefs supersede those of the secular population? It's actually quite fascinating looking in America at this. That over the gay marriage thing, the idea that because it says so in one book, in a by definition secular nation, the separation of church and state is written into their basic constitution, that sort of, I have my book, and I believe that it supersedes this book. Interesting, in my opinion. Very interesting. The biggest problem I have with politics today is something that's very well explained in meme theory. There is a CPG Grey video on this. I believe it's called This Video Will Make You Angry, I believe. And it's the idea that people will congregate in groups and they will find an oppositional relationship. So, as me and Dan have been talking, the feminist and the anti-feminist. To these groups, the other side is a monolithic, singular entity, whereas their own side is a fractured mess. Whereas both sides are a fractured mess. And the reason that the other side is seen as monolithic is because you listen to internal sources, not third-party or oppositional sources. I'm as bad at this as anyone else. Look at the news sites you look at, or where you get your information. Dan gets his information from a lot of YouTubers. I don't know his current favourites. It's been a while since our YouTube watching synced up. So he gets his information from various YouTubers, and I believe a number of Facebook groups. I get my information from the Huffington Post or the Guardian. Very left-wing, very pro-feminist organisations. Now, I also have a Google News feed that brings me other stuff, but I'll normally click on links to sources that I approve of, and that's the best way to say it. It's like, I don't approve of the Telegraph. I will look at the Independent. I'll never look at the Mirror. It works like that. And we all do this. We all pick and choose and cherry pick. But we need to be aware that the oppositional side is not monolithic. It's actually gotten to such a bad degree in America where just saying you're of the oppositional side of the political parties, you're either a wingnut or a libertard. That's how the rhetoric in America goes now between people online. I've seen people attacked on various social media sites, mainly Tumblr, because I quite like Tumblr, for proposing left-wing ideas, because naturally I follow left-wing people, this is what we all do, and for them to be then attacked. It's like, if I had known you were a left-wing person, I would never have subscribed. It's like, but you are aware that just because you enjoyed something by a left-wing person, their politics does not taint your enjoyment. And that's a problem in political discussion as a whole now. You have to be a part of the group and against the out-group. It's actually an interesting form of tribalism, if you think about it. I haven't really thought about it in the anthropological form, but yeah, it's essentially a new form of ideological tribalism, that you have the in-group and there are the social pressures there, and you're aware of the social pressures, but there's the out-group, and you have to do everything in your power to resist the out-group. It's like, I have read an anthropological textbook a long time ago, that most tribal names mean the people, the humans. So it's, we're the humans, you're the non-humans. Think back to the ancient Greeks. This is one of my favourite language things, but it fits in quite well. To the Greeks, everyone else was a barbarian. A barbarian is a derogative term of non-Greek speakers. It means that basically the Greeks thought everyone who didn't speak Greek was going bar 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 bar. That's what they thought non-Greek speakers sounded like. So instantly you have this oppositional relationship of the Greeks and the barbarians. But we know that the Greeks weren't the Greeks until quite a long time later, until the invasion of Rome. We had the Athenians, the Spartans, the Arcadians. And that's how all of these political ideologies are today. I know very little about the anti-feminist movement or the men's rights movement, other than to laugh at it, because that's all that's been presented to me by the feminist movement. Because the men's rights movement is a monolithic other. Whereas I know the feminist movement is a fractured entity, full of disgusting people, TERFs, outdated thoughts, screaming Tumblrites, and there's all this other stuff. But to Dan, or perhaps to other people who aren't a part of the movement anymore, or never have, it is a monolithic whole of conformity that, well, it's the screaming Tumblrites who are determining the norm now, and it's always that. It's the loudest people who win. Like, to take America as an example, the current political candidates, there are really two I know of for the right wing. Dr. Ben Carson and Donald Trump. Now, these are the two most extreme candidates on the right wing. And they're also, arguably, the least representative of the majority of Americans, but they're the ones you hear about. Now, whether or not they'll actually get the Republican nomination, I don't know. It's actually, I think Carson might, but that's another matter entirely. I may actually devote some of next year to talking about the American elections from an outside perspective. But yeah, that's sort of my take on modern politics, is these tribal ideologies, and I think we need to get beyond that as we did socially. I've strayed far from my actual views here, but I think politics is such a difficult and deep thing that summing it up in under half an hour is almost impossible. That's why I rambled. I always ramble. So, yeah, I hope that gives you some idea of what I think. I mean, I can talk a lot more about various subjects. In fact, I find it very hard to talk about broad topics. So, if you're interested, actually let me know what you'd like if you'd like me to discuss on various aspects of this. You know, if you want me to talk about the trans experience, my own and those of other trans people in the world, I'm more than willing to do that, because that's one of the things that upsets me the most. I know I shouldn't do this, but I go on to comment threads a lot, especially on news articles. And boy howdy do they depress me. So, yeah, let's end it there, but basically the caveat on no politics is gone. We're going to talk politics in the future. I will, at least. We'll see if Dan feels like it. So, what are we going to do next? Well, there's not going to be any more videos till the 4th, when we're going to have the next generic podcast hangout. Then we're going to start bringing in more creative work, because I want to do more creative stuff. I think we're going to do mainly audio, because that's what we're best set up for. But we each have our own ideas. I'd like to write some scripts. I don't know what Dan's planning, but I'm sure he's got something interesting. He always has some pretty interesting ideas, but never has the confidence to put them through. And I think we need to give him that confidence here on the channel. So, you know, do it, Dan. Then we'll be doing the vlogs again. I don't know when the next one will be. It might be that Friday, or we might come in with a creative piece. But we're going to reduce it down to 2 videos a week at most. One of them will be a hangout, because we really like doing those, and I think you guys like watching them. So thank you, and good night.